Check. Okay. Welcome. All right, so I got some announcements. We are live. We're doing the live stream right now, but I got some announcements I want to share. Next week, we'll have my dad, missionary Robert Menchaca. We have my mom here right now. And the last Sunday of July, we're going to have Alex. He stepped out maybe for a minute, but it's going to be good. Alex is running when he's scared right now. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's going to be good. The last Sunday of the month, we're going to be in the park. Alex is going to be sharing a word. I think, is it his first time? I believe it is something. Yeah, it's going to be his first time. So, but on top of that, like what I would say is invite people, man. I already talked to a few people online who were like, oh, we're going to go when Alex shares. And I'm like, wow, all right. Nobody likes me. So but no, it's going to be good at the park. Alex is going to share. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. We want to go through just our announcements. If we look at giving as an act of worship. We do give. You can give online. You can give in person. We have some envelopes. You can do the NWLA Church at gmail.com for Zelle. You can do our online, give online at our website, NWLAchurch.com, and then also through the Church Center app. One of the things that I like to do every time we get together is I like to go over our culture, and I want to do that because it's something that I think all of us, I want us all to walk with this together. What is our culture? What is our vision, our mission, our values? And so one of the things is we know our vision to know him and make him known. And that's out of John 17:3, Acts 20:24. And then we believe this because we believe Jesus is the only way. That's out of John 14:6. Our mission, make disciples, baptize, and teach. Make disciples, baptize, teach. That's out of Matthew 28:18 through 20. Our values, we believe we're biblical, we are relational, spirit-filled and spirit-led, kingdom-minded, and then we also believe in empowerment. One of the other ones that I would ask you, pray about this, is because we want to include values of who we are, what we're about. One of them is honesty that I'm really praying about adding. I don't know if using that word is the best terminology, but what we want to do is present that we want to be honest. Like, we don't want someone walking with us or us walking with others and not able to be honest. And we believe truth in love, of course, right? Like, not honest as like, hey, you look really ugly today, but like honest as in like we don't hold things from each other. We don't present the culture where we're saying maybe we can hide something from God. God sees us. God knows us. So honesty. So I really want you to pray about that. And standards of leadership, and we want to repeat this so that you guys hold me accountable. We hold each other accountable. Of anybody that's in leadership, one of our standards is we believe that you should have a healthy relationship with God. And we go into detail about that in a few different ways, but a healthy relationship with God essentially looks like that you're walking with Jesus, that you know Jesus, and you present Jesus everywhere you go. Okay? So healthy relationship with God. Service. Every leader in the house of God is a servant. We believe that. Family first. That our family is our first ministry. Right? Our family is our first ministry. And then also give financially in different ways. That looks like tithing, offering, giving into ministries, other things we do, and honoring one another. Honoring one another. I like to teach about honor, but I also like to joke and have fun. So there are times when I know that I will joke and we'll joke around, but there are times that when we step into a certain area or we go outside of our personal setting, that we do honor one another. Like we take time to say, like we don't talk, we don't joke about someone we know. If we walk somewhere, or go somewhere new, we're not making fun of people from our church, especially our leaders. We're honoring them, right? That's one of the things it's a standard of leadership. And so, the Lord's still helping me, right? Moy, I'm still learning. Lord's still helping me. But I'm sharing this with you so that everybody knows this is what we're about, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're moving forward. You guys know that we support 3 ministries, and it's a huge blessing for me. But we have 2 representatives from 2 of the mission projects that we support. We have my mom tonight from Praise Chapel Europe, and we honor and thank God for what they're doing. And also we have my friend Rodrigo. And I got to share a few stories first. Don't worry, I'll honor you, bro. For me, just to have him and Anna Lena and the kids here is just an awesome. It's just an awesome moment because the things that we've gone through, what we've seen, working together. I remember we were at a place, and I'm sharing this with you. We were at a place in our lives when we were like, we had just come back from Germany, from being there the first time, and we were like, man, Lord, what do you want us doing? Like, we literally were like, I have no clue what to do. And then it was like, I got to go find a job. I got to go buy a car. I got to go figure out all this stuff. We had no clue what to do. And I was like, Lord, you got to help me, man, because I don't know what to do. Like, I really don't know what to do. I'm just trying to figure this out, trying to take care of my wife and my son. We're trying to take the right steps forward to serve you. We just want to be close to you, want to know you, want to serve you as best as possible. And then this guy calls me and says, hey, man, would you ever consider coming back to Germany? And I was like, at that moment, I had never thought about working outside of our own little network. And when he called me, I remember it was just the Holy Spirit of like, you're praying, you're asking, and I'm having this guy call you right now. And I was like, yeah. I remember we were on the phone for like 2 hours. It was like 2 in the morning, I think, for me or him. I don't remember. It was middle of the night for one of us. And we were just on the phone talking, and I was just, man, like, I believe this is the Lord. And it opened up some great doors, some great opportunities, not only for us, like, in ministry, but for us just our lives. Like, just being able to connect, to see what God is doing, to see how God moves outside in different areas. And I will say, and I got so many stories, man. I got all these, I'm trying, which one should I share? But yes, I know. So one of the stories, I'll say this. Okay, this is probably one of the ones that I think is most memorable for us. So I was always preaching, always developing sermons, and he introduced a new way to do it. And it was a collaborative sermon prep in which other people got involved in the process. And we all, kind of, us 4 know what's going on with that. But basically, I hated it. And I told him, I was like, this is the worst, man. This doesn't work. There's no way. This is not helpful. This destroys, how do you, no, this doesn't work. And as we're going forward, he was like, but we should do this. And I was like, but I think you're wrong. And I was just like, no, like, this is not going to work. And I remember we were in London, and we were staying at somebody's house. We were up in the attic, sleeping up there. And I woke up in the morning, and I was like, I hate to admit it, this works. And I just remember I was so humbled because I was like, man, he was right. And it happened a few times, I will admit that. But I do, we're going to read a scripture, and then Pastor Rodrigo is just a good friend that I value the relationship, man. I love them, I love their family, I love what they're doing. And to have you guys here is such a huge blessing. I think not only just for here, like in this physical space, but what we're going to present online and everything like that. But I'm going to read some scripture before he comes up. And if we can pull up the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5. We're going to read through this together. 2 Kings, chapter 5, and we're going to read verses 1 through 15. So it says this, Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and in high favor, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Now the Syrians, on one of their raids, had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his Lord, "Thus and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which read, "When this letter reaches you, you know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man sends word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he's seeking a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come now to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." But Naaman was angry and went away, saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely come out to me, and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and went away in a rage. But his servants came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? Has he actually said to you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Welcome, Pastor Rodrigo.
Thank you, Gabo. It's so good to be here. I've heard so many stories from him about some of you, about this place and about ministry. And you know, when you're here so much, you imagine things, and it's almost like a dream, you know, to be here, like, because it's something you imagine, you've heard, but you've never experienced. This is actually like our first time in this area. And even yesterday, we have been welcomed with such a love and hospitality that we, you know, it was just great, and it's just the beginning. I'm gonna be a little bit slow probably, because English is my second or third language. I'm jet lagged. We just had an 11-hour flight from Germany, and we arrived last night around 8 p.m. So, but by God's grace, we'll make it, and we'll be sharing about our lives, about what God's doing through us, and also challenging each one of us to consider what we can do in our context, in our reality, as we listen about the ministry that we do. I also have to say a big thanks for the support. You know, NWLA is one of those faithful churches that every month, you know, gives towards the work that we do, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much for that. Let me talk a little bit about me, so you can see the context. Did you guys manage to get the PowerPoint working? I grew up in Brazil. I was born in Brazil. And I used to go to a Baptist church. And the way that people remember me is like, Rodrigo, that terrible child. You know, I would be doing like all this, I don't know, just things that kids do, like throw stones, you know, at the windows of the neighbors, not paying attention at what's going on in church, and just like messing around, really. But there was one thing, and this also everyone remembers. Every time there was a missionary coming to our church, that little boy, Rodrigo, me, would be sitting here at the first row. and really like paying attention, just because the topic was missions. So as I look back, I can clearly see that I had this calling, or like this dream, or this fascination about missions, even from a very early age. That's our family. You've met them, and that's the vision of our ministry: displaced people attaining life in all its fullness. So we'll get to that. But the next one, please. The next slide. There is a photo of me dressed as an angel for a Christmas play, but I was really not an angel as a child. So I had this dream, like missions on one side, but on the other side, I really wanted to work for the Air Force in Brazil. And then when I was 18, I took an exam, and I was admitted into the Air Force, and I'm working there for 5 years, and I'm looking at my life. And like in the military, you kind of know what's gonna happen, right? Every 3 years, you get promoted to this, you get promoted to that, you earn a little bit more money. And that sort of prospect, even though was nice from the perspective of giving you like safety and security, was just so boring to me. And that dream, it was almost like, you want to climb that mountain, it's like big dream, and you get there, and it's like, is that it? And then that calling, that vision, that dream that I had as a child for missions start coming back. And I start to realize that my calling was not that special calling where like an angel showed up to you and say, I'm calling you to go there. But it was like a gradual thing. It started when I was young. And over the years, as I translated missionaries coming to Brazil, as I did missions regionally, I can recognize that God was preparing me all the way to be doing what I'm doing full time. And after 5 years at the Air Force, I decided to resign. All my friends told me, you're crazy, you shouldn't be doing this. But I resigned, and I went to study theology in another city. And I studied for 4 years. I was ordained as a pastor, and I'm thinking I'm gonna work in Brazil somehow with missions. And at the end of my time, you can show the next one. My pastor, I was like a trainee pastor at that church. My pastor comes to me, and he says, Rodrigo, I have a graduation present for you. Because now you're being ordained, you finish your course, and the gift is, we're gonna send you to Mozambique for 3 months. So you're gonna have like an international experience as a missionary. So I was in Mozambique. And what happened is that one thing followed the other. I was in Mozambique, and then a friend that I had translated in Wales called me to work for a year in Wales. And then, I went to London to work in a church there as an assistant pastor. I met an Elena, somewhere in between. And we are living as a married couple in England from 2010. And we have this idea that at some point, we should either go to Germany or to Brazil to be having kids when we are near to the extended family. And we started praying about that. God, give us the right moment, give us the right place, Germany, Brazil, that's our idea. If that's from you, confirms. The next one, please. And then we received this invitation to go and work in Germany at the International Baptist Church in Frankfurt. So it's like an English-speaking church in Frankfurt, the most international city in Germany. And if you look at that canvas, that destroyed canvas, that's a picture of what that church looked like. In every aspect you can imagine, the church was a mess. Just like the way that canvas is burned, broken, torn apart, that church had a financial debt of 40,000 euros. They had a building that had asbestos, as like there was leaking, like the building was, as we say in German, kaputt, completely destroyed. In terms of theology, there was a big confusion because, some leaders before me were preaching that if you get sick, you shouldn't go to the doctor. And then someone at the church got cancer, didn't go to the doctor, and died. So theologically, financially, logistically, like in every aspect you imagine, the church was like, really dying, if not already dead. And the invitation that the church made to me was, Rodrigo, we want to try for 1 more year. And if things start to improve, great, we continue. But if things continue the same, at least you as a pastor can help us to close the church. And I started praying. And the invitation didn't make a lot of sense, you know. But as we prayed, God started giving us this image of a blank canvas in complete contrast with the other canvas. And it was like God was saying, I want you to go, and I'm going to bring more people. Look at this church not as this destroyed canvas, but look at this church as this blank canvas, because I'm going to bring people, and I'm going to paint a beautiful picture. And we had no idea what that meant. But by faith we came. The next one. As we arrived in Germany in 2013, what is happening? One of the biggest waves of refugees are arriving in Germany. Up until then, I never worked with refugees. I worked in Brazil, I worked in Africa, but I never worked with refugees. And they are coming. That's a photo that I took myself, as you know, myself and a group of people went to the train station to welcome them. And they are looking for churches. They are looking for the one thing that they have always been forbidden to access: Bible. Stories about Jesus. Going to church. You know, if you're coming from Iran, if you're coming from Afghanistan, that's not available to you. And in one of my first Sundays, this guy called, I'm going to call him Nick, is not his real name. He shows up at the church. I'm preaching, and the church looked like this one, actually, like the ceiling and everything. And I'm here preaching. In the middle of the service, this guy walks in, and I can recognize that he's like from Afghanistan, from the Middle East, from that area, and I see he is a refugee. He comes. I cannot hear what's going on, but I can kind of make sense of it. The welcome team is saying, come, take a seat. And he's, no, I want to stand. And he's like walking from one side to the other. I'm here trying to preach, and this guy is distracting me because he's looking at me and just walking from one side to the other, really nervous. And I'm sensing like in my spirit, this guy wants something with me. He wants to talk to me. Who is he? What's going on? As soon as I finish the service, I say amen. This guy runs through the corridor. And he comes to me and he asks, are you the pastor? And I say, yes, I am the pastor. And he says, okay, my name is Nick. I'm from Afghanistan. I'm a Muslim, but I'm not one of those radical Muslims. Actually, I was in the army. I was trained by the US forces to fight against Taliban when I was shot. And then he raises his trousers, or his pants, as you say, and he showed me like a big scar. And he said, I was shot, I was taken to the hospital, my brother was killed in the same battle. I managed to escape. After 8 months recovering, I made up my mind, I have to leave this country. Otherwise they will come back and kill me. Pastor, it took me 2 years to come from Afghanistan to Germany. I went from country to country, being robbed, being beaten, being deported. After 2 years, I made it. I arrived here 2 weeks ago, and they put me in a camp, in a dormitory, together with another 100 young men. And last week, as I sleep, I had a dream. And in this dream, a man in white robes showed up to me. And this man said to me, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I have been trying to communicate with you, but you are not listening to me. Pastor, I woke up, I was shaken, I was terrified. And I started asking everyone, who is that guy in white robes? And what those words mean. No one could tell me. But then one other refugee came to me and said, look, I'm not completely sure, but I think this is in the Bible. This is a Bible verse, I think. So, Pastor, I came here to church to ask you, is this in the Bible? The guy was literally asking me, please, disciple me and baptize me, because Jesus himself already revealed himself to me. I've heard about stories like that. I've read about stories like that, but I myself had never experienced something like that. And what happened after Nick's conversion is amazing. One after the other, like a snowball. Nick brings 2 friends, those 2 friends bring 2 friends, and then their families. Within a year, we baptized, I'm going to put a low number, just to, people say pastors like to say big numbers. At the very least, we baptized 40 people, only from Afghanistan and Iran, within the first year. So that church which was dying, now the church is like booming. People are excited because there is life. Jesus is injecting life through the refugees and also through the people who were coming and were discouraged before. Now they see a purpose for being there. That's a photo of Nick's baptism day. We cannot show his face. But, I remember very well. We were all very emotional. It was a big moment for him. And we hugged each other and someone took a photo. And I treasured that. It was a very special moment. And it was just the beginning of what God was about to do. The next slide, please. Sometimes people would come to me. You can see the baptism certificate. You see, that's just from one baptism. We're giving people like a lot of those. Sometimes people would come and say, Pastor, I became a Christian. I've read the Bible. I know I have to be baptized. However, my mom, my sister, my cousin, my dad, people are still back home. And if I do that, I don't care about my life. I don't care if people would kill me. I would die for Jesus, but I don't want other people to pay for that when they are living in a place like Afghanistan or Iran. Can you baptize me in a lake? And I say, yes. Invite your friends, invite those that you trust. We go to a lake and we baptize you. So you see a photo of one of those. And I hope you will not be scandalized with me. I'm going to tell you something that I don't tell very often. There were some people that would come to me and say, Pastor, can I get baptized at home, in my bathroom, in my bathtub? That's how you say it? We fill it up with water. I invite my friends to my house. I invite my friends to my bathroom. And you baptize me there. I really cannot do it at the church. Because people would for sure kill my family back home. And we would do it. We would do it. And that way, through the influx of refugees, that church was revitalized. The next one. And it was not just the spiritual side, the discipleship and the baptism. There was also the practical side, because those people have needs. We started visiting the camps. We organized events and dinners. We opened the church for language classes. There was things going on. The next. And the result of that is a revitalized church. You can see that the church kind of looks like this one. We are running over 100 people within a year. The financial debt that I told you about was completely paid off. And the church was, growing and developing. At some point, 50% of our membership were refugees. And God was at the move. The next one. So in 2017, I had this idea of setting up a non-profit organization, a Christian charity, to work with them in ways that the church couldn't. Because in Germany, there is a lot of prejudice. You might not know this, but if you are Catholic, you're a Christian. If you're Lutheran, you're a Christian. If you are Baptist, Assemblies of God, Pentecostal, Methodist, all the others, they consider you almost like a sect. And you don't get access to places. You don't get access, for instance, to the camp as a pastor, because you're not Lutheran or Catholic. So I set this up, and we started doing some things. We started to borrow the sports hall from the city to do work with the kids. We had access to the camp to offer homework support to the children, to the refugee children. You see that picture to the right? And then we also start organizing these trips to Lesbos, Greece, an island very close to Turkey. And if you have seen the news like those, how do you call it? Dinghies, those small boats going from Turkey to Greece. That's the island where they go. That was like the biggest camp in Europe, the biggest refugee camp in Europe for many years. We started also organizing those trips. And, I was pastoring the church, and I started this work to work more focused with refugees through All for Aid. The next one. And the work started to develop. Within a couple of years, we were in Greece, managing our own center, where we offer showers for refugee ladies, clothes, food, laundry. We have another center in Cyprus. We started some work in Romania, in Ukraine. And the Bible verse that basically moves us, or gives us like the basis for the work that we do, is 1 Peter 3:15, which says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. Why? Because when you work in those contexts, you cannot be so direct and so upfront about your faith. You have to show love. You have to help. And you have to wait for them to ask, because when they ask, that shows that they are ready. And if you go too quickly, they might just refuse you. Most of them have never seen a Christian before. For most of those people, we, like the All for Aid team, we are the first people, the first Christians that they have ever met. So there is a lot of mistrust. There is a lot of deconstruction that needs to happen, because they have developed, an image of what Christian is, and we have to destroy that and give them like a perspective of what really it means. The next one. And I want to be showing you, I will be showing you some more photos and talk more about the work that we do. But I want to do that through the lenses or with the basis of this text that we have just read in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1 to 15. I'm sure you have heard this story before. You have read this story before about Naaman and the healing that took place. And what I would like to do is to look at that text very briefly and see what can we learn from it. And then to use some illustrations from the work of All for Aid and also apply that to our lives today. So, the next one. You know how the story goes. Naaman has a skin disease and he goes to Israel for help. The king of Israel gets desperate. The prophet Elisha comes in to help. Naaman eventually, go and wash himself 7 times and he is healed. But how does the whole thing start? And many times we miss this. It starts with the little girl in verse 3. Because she is the one who said, if my master would know the prophet in Samaria. She's the one that puts that little idea in their mind so that the story develops from there. If that little girl was not there, if that little girl wouldn't have said what she said, maybe this would have never happened. The next one. So there are some characteristics of that little girl that I want to share with you very briefly. Because for me, what she did was nothing more than pointing the way to God. Today we have very fancy words for that, evangelism and sharing the gospel. And sometimes we get so scared about those things, right? Or we don't know what to do many times. But at the same time, we have the pressure to do it. And I think if we look at that, sharing the gospel, evangelizing people, if we look at that as simply pointing the way to God, it gets easier. And for me, that's what she did. She was able to point the way. She didn't do the healing. She didn't go like with a very elaborate sermon to Naaman. She simply pointed the way. I understand what you're going through. If you would meet the prophet in Samaria, he would heal you. That's all that she did, pointing the way. So, to be able to do that, first of all, she had to have compassion. And this is really interesting, because compassion means, to suffer together, to have a feeling of distress and pity for the suffering or for the misfortune of another, often including the desire to alleviate it. But the problem is, or the problem not, but the interesting thing is that that little girl, the Bible also says that she was actually a slave. She was a servant. She was brought out from her country to a different country by force. She was young. She had to learn a new language. She had to learn a new culture. But who very likely brought her, who very likely made her a slave was Naaman. Because Naaman was the commander of the Syrian army. That's what the Bible says. And he was the commander, if you calculate it, when that war happened, that brought her as a servant. Now, imagine that you are that girl, and you are brought by force from your home, from your country, from your family, to a different place, and you are made a servant, you're made a slave, and then that guy gets sick. How would you feel? I have to be honest with you. Very likely, what I feel would be, you see, God's punishing you now. You're getting what you deserve. And I would have that sense of revenge, like satisfaction for seeing him suffering, the same way that he made me suffer. So when you look at things from those lenses, the fact that she had compassion becomes really special. Because to have compassion, to a friend, that's good. To have compassion for a family member who is suffering, that's very good. To have compassion for a neighbor, for a child, for someone who lent you money once, for someone who showed you some hospitality once, someone who gave you a ride from church once, to have compassion for those people, it's good. But to have compassion for someone who mistreated you, that's special. And that's actually what we're seeing here. To have compassion for refugees, the next one, in our work is also one of the pillars for the work that we do. This is what the refugee camp looked like back in the day when I went there for the first time. I grew up in Brazil, so just keep that in mind, right? So I've seen poverty in Brazil. I worked in Africa. I've seen poverty in Africa. I've never seen anything like this before. What I've seen in Lesbos, I've never seen anywhere. The next one. People living in tents, like 3-4 square meters, and like 3-4 families sharing that space. When I was there for the first time, you know what the ratio of people per toilet was? 200 people for every toilet. I grew up in a house with 1 bathroom, and that was already crazy. Now imagine 200 people sharing a shower, 200 people sharing a toilet. The next one. So our response in compassion is like to manage this beautiful center where we offer showers, especially for women and girls. Why? Because at the camp, there are some showers, not enough. And the men, unfortunately, they just take over. Some of the showers have like a sign for females at the door, but they don't care. They go in and use the shower. And also the men, if they're coming from the Middle East, they can remove the shirt, they can go and bathe themselves in the sea or take a bucket. The women cannot. The women cannot even remove their veil. How can they, take a shower somewhere? So the showers are especially for the women. It's our way of showing compassion for their situation. It's like a beautiful place where they can do like, have workshops, sewing machines, they can do their laundry, they can get some food. That's, you know, how can you not have compassion for that situation that they are in? The next one. And a lot of things happen there. You know, there are showers, there are baby bath, the laundry room, clothing distribution. We give personal hygiene items. And what's really special about the way we do it is that they get from the hands of other women. You know, there are at least another 2 or 3 organizations there doing the same. But, you know, think about personal hygiene items for women. You know, do you want to be getting that from the hands of a man? My wife wouldn't. My mom also wouldn't. So why, you know, you're going to treat them differently? So they get that from the hands of women in our team, and we do all sorts of activities. And this latest thing that you see at the bottom, the spa, that's like amazing. So, you know, the same story that Gabo told you before about something that I brought as a suggestion, and at first he was very reluctant, but then he said, oh yeah, that's good. The same thing happened to me with this spa thing. Someone in my team came, Rodrigo, I want to open a spa at the refugee center. And I'm like, are you crazy? What do you mean? Do you want to ruin our, you know, fundraising efforts, telling people we're opening a spa for the refugees? Because, you know, if we're giving food, people care. Giving education, people care. Now you want to open a spa? Like, what do you think? Like a swimming pool or what? And she said, no. Not like that. My idea is like to take this room that we are not using, make it like very beautiful. We put some Christian music in the background. Just instrumental. We get some hot water. We wash their feet. We massage their feet. For 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then they go. It's like a moment for them to relax, to go out of the craziness of the camp. And, you know, another strong expression of our Christian faith to them, you know. What's more beautiful than to wash someone's feet, right? And I was, okay, try it, have a go. You will not going to believe it. That's the one place where we're having the most opportunities to share about the gospel. Because the women come, and they are very hesitant. And normally, all of them say, no. You cannot wash my feet. And the story I'm telling you is like what I've heard, because I don't have access to that place. It's only for women. So I hear from, you know, from my wife has been there, like female team members, they tell me that. The refugee women come and they refuse it. No. You cannot do that for me. Let me wash your feet first. And then we say, no. Just relax. Take your seat. Let's do it for you. It's your moment. And they sit down. They start having their feet massaged. And in 2 or 3 minutes, they start crying. And they say, I don't know for how long, but it's been a long time since I had someone showing me any act of kindness as a refugee. And then we tell them, we do this because we love Jesus and Jesus loves you. If they become defensive, we respect it. We don't push it. The seed has been sown. But many times they keep asking questions about our faith, about Jesus. The next one. That's another place that we have at our center, you know, to show compassion. There are at this moment about 1,000 people without access to food at the refugee camp because of a law that has changed in Greece. From one day to the other, they lost access to the meals inside the camp. So the food bank that we have became even more special. And we serve hundreds of people in Cyprus and in Lesbos with food. And what's really nice about the food bank is that people come and they can choose what they like. It's not like, you know, take this bag of food and we choose for you. No, you can choose. We give them time. They look around. They choose the items. And as they do it, we are there together with them, talking, creating relationships, and very often praying for them and sharing a little bit about our testimonies or about our faith. The next one. Ukrainian refugees, how not to have compassion about what happened, about the act of aggression that they've been suffering. So at the beginning of the war, we decided to go there to pray, me and 2 colleagues. And we ended up creating a new program in Romania where we have a house and we welcome some Ukrainian refugees, the next one. And again, you know, we try to show compassion and give them the best that we can, a very nice place where they can stay and be safe. But in our own context, how can we consider this point of compassion? We've seen it in the life of that little girl. We've seen it in our work with refugees. But when people come to us and they are suffering, do we have compassion? I think that's the important question. Because to be able to point anyone to Jesus, to point the way, I think you have to have compassion. The same way that Jesus had compassion for us, we have to have compassion, no matter what the situation is. People come to us, maybe at work, maybe neighbors, and they're going through divorce, they are going through sickness, they are going through all types of things. And we are used to hear that all the time, right? How many people do you know who are going through a divorce? How many people do you know who have cancer? How many people do you know who have like sickness? And I don't know if our hearts become hard or just insensitive, but we tend to normalize those things. And even as Christians, very often, all that we can say is like, okay, well, I feel so sorry for you. We don't even say like, I'm going to pray for you anymore, because it's like a normal thing. So having compassion is important. But having credibility is also important. And for me, that's the second thing that that girl had. Because if you consider, look, there are 4 things that's going against her. First of all, she's a child. She's probably around 11 years old. She's a foreigner. And I don't know if any of you has ever been a foreigner in a different country. And you know how it feels if you have. She's a servant. She's a slave. And she was a female at a time where females shouldn't open their mouth, really, and say anything. So she has all those things going against her. Why should you listen to a child who's giving you advice of where you should go to be healed? Why are you going to listen to a foreigner who's giving you advice where you should go to be healed? Why are you listening to a slave? Why are you listening to a female? But somehow, despite all of that, her words carried some weight. And when she said, if my master would go to the prophet in Samaria, he listened to it. And he did it. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us why Naaman decided to listen to this girl. But for me, the only reason, and I've studied this passage many times, the only reason that I can imagine is that somehow she had credibility. She had enough credibility by doing other things to compensate for all those things that she had against her. Maybe it's because the way she served, and she served really well, and she treated people with love, and she treated people with respect. Maybe it's because she was seen praying 3 times a day like Daniel. The Bible doesn't tell us that. That's just me imagining. How come she had credibility? We don't know. But somehow we can be sure that she had. Because when she said it, he listened to it. And he followed her advice. Having credibility in our work is also important. What I'm showing you is a place that we call the shop. It's that place where the women come to collect some clothes, to collect some brass, personal hygiene items. There is a mirror. They can remove their clothes. They can try it. They can check the color. They can check the sizes. It's like a shop. That's why we call it a shop. But they don't pay for it, just like they don't pay for the food. It gives them a lot of dignity. But to be able to do that, you have to build trust. And we have to make like a commitment, a law really, that no man goes inside that place. Because if they cannot be seen even without the scarf, imagine if something happens and a man comes in when a refugee lady is trying a bra, for instance. That would kill our ministry completely. So we have to have credibility that when we tell them, you can go in this space and this is a safe space for you, we have to keep it as a safe space. You have to have that credibility. What about in our own context? And that's the question for us. As we try to point people to Jesus, do we have credibility? How do your work colleagues see you? Are you in time? Do you do your work well? How do your neighbors see you? Do they hear you shouting with your wife, with your kids? And credibility. At school, do you cheat on your exams? Do you do your things, whatever things you do with excellence, to the point that people looking at you say, yeah, this guy has actually, credibility to tell me about what he's doing. There is a funny story that I think was my grandmother who told me the first time in Brazil. In Brazil, like in many countries, it's common to greet people by saying, a paz de Deus, the peace of God. It's like saying hello, but that's how Christians greet each other. A paz de Deus, the peace of God, the peace of God. And some people do it with other people who are not Christians. That was also common back in the day. You would say the peace of God because it's such a common thing. You would say it for Christians and non-Christians. So there's a story that there was this lady, and she was greeting her neighbor nearly every day. She moved to the neighborhood, and she started greeting this new neighbor, the peace of God, in the morning. They come up, they see each other again in the afternoon, the peace of God. So that neighbor who was living there before, after a week hearing that greeting, the next time that it happened, she said, I'm going to ask her some questions because I'm not really understanding this type of greeting. So it happened. The neighbor came and said, the peace of God. And then she said, look, I have to ask you, what do you mean by the peace of God? Because if the peace that you're talking about is you shouting with your husband, or you're beating up your kids, I don't want that sort of peace. Credibility, right? Credibility. If you want to point people to Jesus, you need to have that. But the final thing that girl had, she had compassion, she had credibility, but she also had wisdom. When you look at the text, this is really interesting. She speaks at the right time. She had been at that house for years. She never spoke anything maybe so direct about God. And when is the right time? Maybe you're wondering today, you have a friend, you have a family member that you really want to share about Jesus, you want to point him to the way, and you're asking, when is the right time? When is the best time? One of the best times, unfortunately, is the time of suffering, because it makes people more sensitive. If that girl would have told about the prophet in Samaria when Naaman was, the mighty warrior coming back from a victory, a battle, he wouldn't have listened to her. But she speaks at the right time, and that shows a lot of wisdom. The second thing is that she speaks to the right person. And if you go back and look at the Bible, you're going to see, who does she speak to? Does she speak directly to Naaman? No. She speaks to Naaman's wife. She goes to the wife. If you're a child, sometimes you have to go to your mom to get to your dad, right? And I think that's what she's doing. Also to honor him, not to shame him or anything. She goes to the wife and she says, oh, if my master would have known about the prophet in Samaria. She goes to the wife, and then the wife goes to Naaman. That shows a lot of wisdom. She had a strategy. And finally, she shows a lot of wisdom in the sense that she knew what to say. She knew exactly what to say. And again, many times for us, it doesn't need to be like the super elaborate gospel message, sermon. A short thing that you can say sometimes has a great impact. It was one sentence. If my master would have known about the prophet in Samaria, and that was enough. Wisdom is also super important in our context, in our work with refugees. And I will share one final story as we come to a close. I want to tell you about one of the young ladies that came to Christ. Her name is Sarah. Again, also not her real name, but that's how we call her. Like many of those refugee women, she came to our center, and initially she just brought some clothes to do her laundry. She did the laundry once, she did the laundry twice, 3 times, and then she was looking. Some refugee ladies were taking showers. They are safe. No man came in. So, oh yeah, I can trust this place. I can also take showers. She started taking showers. Sometimes she would bring her kid, like this 2-year-old boy, to the center. And one of our team members, she realized that Sarah would speak English very well. She was coming from Afghanistan, but somehow she was educated. Because, many girls don't have access to go to school, but she did, and she could speak very good English. And she was invited to work, as we say, as a volunteer, a refugee volunteer. So she would come to our center and help with translation, help with cleaning, help with the planning. We have quite a few of those ladies who like to be useful, right? Because they're at the camp, they cannot work, they don't do anything, so they come and they volunteer. And as she worked with us as a volunteer, Sarah started to hear about the stories about Jesus, about her faith. Every morning she would take part at the prayer time to begin the day, and she started to ask questions. And then one of our female team members invited her to a cafe. That's what we do. When you want to talk with freedom, you take the refugee who wants to hear more to a safe place. Because at our center, there are other refugees, there are people listening, and eardropping, and you never know what they can do with the information that they get. So she was taken to a cafe. She asked some questions, she got some answers, and then she was invited to a meal inside the house of this, team member, of my colleague. And she came with her husband. That was a big thing. She came with her husband. They were eating, they're having a nice meal. Towards the end of the meal, Sarah says something like, oh, I have to go, it's getting late, I have to walk back to the refugee camp. And then my colleague said, oh no, that's fine. You can go. Because tomorrow I also have to wake up early because I'm going to church. And then the husband comes into the conversation and says, are you going to church? Can we come with you? Guys, if you're working with people coming from Muslim background, this is like huge. Someone is asking to come to church with you. And they came. They came to church, they listened to the sermon, they enjoyed the worship. And towards the end, when there's the altar call, I would love to tell you that they raised their hands and became believers, but they didn't. If they had 10 questions, every time they meet with us, by now, after being at church, they had 100 questions. And it took another 9 months, 8, 9 months of meetings and meals and questions until they eventually came to the place where they said, we want to place our faith in Jesus and we want to be baptized. And it was like a great joy for us and our team to see that couple, coming through the waters of baptism. And I tell you why, to be completely honest with you. It was such a great joy because we don't see that happening very often. We don't have enough time. Sometimes those refugees are there for a year, and a year is not enough. Many times a year is not enough to bring them from a place of completely mistrust in Christianity and Christians to a place of faith. You have to deconstruct everything that they believe, everything that they've heard about the Bible, about Jesus, about believers, about Christians. And I guess I can say this, just to really give you a perspective. You know what many of them believe about, Christian women? That they behave almost like prostitutes. That's what they are told in their countries. Oh, when you go there, avoid. Don't allow your wife to be, mixing up with Western women because you're almost like, prostitutes. That's what they hear. So you have to deconstruct that. You have to show them who you really are, show love, treat them with respect, give them back dignity until you bring them to the place where they are ready to give their faith to Jesus. And sometimes we just do the first part, and we don't get to see the end. We don't get to see really, the baptism. But this time, we did, and it was really great. But that shows, how wisdom is necessary in the work that we do. The question is, in our context, how can we apply wisdom? Something for us to be thinking about. Many of us sometimes feel frustrated, when we are asked to evangelize people, to share the gospel with people. I want to give you this tip, let's call it this way. Think about it as pointing the way. It's going to be much easier. Don't think about it as like these big words of, I have to evangelize, I have to share the gospel. Yes, that's true. I'm not saying that's wrong, but try to think it as, I can point the way. Next time someone comes to me at my work and say, man, I'm having big problems with my wife. I might get divorced. Think about it. How can you point the way? Maybe it could be something as simple as, I can pray for you. Look, I go to church every Sunday. Would like to come with me? Maybe, that's going to help. Next time you hear someone, I have cancer. I got sick. I'm so lonely. I'm facing a big problem. I'm afraid of something. Every time you hear those things, those are clues to you. Those are clues that people are giving to you. They're basically giving you the pass. Think about football. It's like they're giving the pass, and you just have to go and kick it. And the kick is like, point the way. And in worst case scenario, if you don't really know what to do, as people tell you about their problems, about their struggles, just say this. Look, I'm a Christian. I go to a church. Is it okay if I ask my pastor to call you and to talk about that? Point the person to someone else. And that also works. But pray for wisdom when those clues come your direction. Just to close, what's needed is compassion, credibility, and wisdom. Every time you think about evangelism, sharing the gospel, pointing people the way, that's what we need. Just like that little girl had. Just like we need in our work with refugees. That's the same thing that you need in your context. Compassion, credibility, and wisdom. The final slide, I leave you with a photo from our family. I ask that you would continue to pray for us. And if you would like to keep in touch, receive our newsletters directly, you can just fill out the card at the end of the service at the table back there. And I think every time you talk about missions, the response is always the same. I've heard that since I was a child. It's pray, go, and give. If God has spoken to you in any of those ways and you'd like to talk more about that, who knows, maybe God's calling you to come and work with us and come to Greece, and help, be it for a week or for a year. It doesn't matter. We'll be glad to talk to you and explore that some more. May God bless you.
Amen. I do want to also say that we support All for Aid financially as a church, but if you feel like personally you want to give aside from that, I would encourage you. That's a good thing. It's something that all of us in our Christian walk, in our Christian faith, that he's right, pray, go, or give, right? We can do one of those. And if we can't go, we can pray and give. If we can go, you're going to want somebody to pray and give. So be part of the work that is ongoing. I think it was such a good word for all of us. And I know that there's a few watching, or that we're watching online. But I do believe the Holy Spirit spoke. I believe that our vision was enlarged to see beyond our context and to also hear about what God is doing outside of the USA. And on top of that, through people that are committed to the call, like Rodrigo and his wife and his family. So let's stand.